Rishayo pi ki muyanti yatra nendriya ritaya. Translation. My dear Brahma, there are instructions and those of my spiritual teacher who engage me in fruitive activities. I now can understand the distinction between devotional service, knowledge, and renunciation. I had some doubts about them, but you have now very kindly dissipated all these doubts. I can now understand how even the great sages are bewildered by the real purpose of life. Of course, there is no question of sense gratification. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. King Barhisman was engaged in different types of sacrifice for elevation to the heavenly planets. People generally are attracted by these activities, and very early is a person attracted to devotional service. Very rarely is a person attracted to devotional service. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms, unless one is very, very fortunate, he does not take to devotional service. Even the so-called learned Vedic scholars are bewildered by devotional service. They are generally attracted to the rituals for sense gratification. In devotional service, there is no sense gratification, but only transcendental loving service to the Lord. Consequently, the so-called priests engaged in sense gratification do not very much like devotional service. The Brahmanas, the priests, have been against this Krishna consciousness movement since it began with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's an interesting statement there. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started this movement, the priestly class lodged complaints to the Qazi, the magistrate of the Mohammedan government. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to lead a civil disobedience movement against the propaganda of the so-called followers of Vedic principles. These people are described as karma jada smartas, which indicates that they are priests engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. It is here stated that such people become bewildered. Vishayopi muyanti. To save oneself from the hands of these karma jada smartas, one should strictly follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sarvadharmam parityaja mamekam saranam vraja. Aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mukshayishyami ma sucha. Okay, it's a very nice verse. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Bhagavad Gita 1866. Text number 58. Karmani arabate yena pumam iha vihayatam. Amutran yena dehena justani sa yad asnute. The results of whatever a living entity does in this life are enjoyed in the next life. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A person generally does not know how one body is linked with another body. How is it possible that one suffers or enjoys the results of activities in this body, yet another body in the next life? This is a question the king wants Narada Muni to answer. How may one have a human body in this life and not have a human body in the next? Even great philosophers or scientists cannot account for the transferal of karma from one body to another. As we experience, every individual soul has an individual body, and one person's activities or one body's activities are not enjoyed or suffered by another body or another person. The question is how the activities of one body are suffered or enjoyed in the next. Okay, that's a fair question. Text 59. The expert knowers of the Vedic conclusions say that one enjoys or suffers the results of his past activities. But practically, it is seen that the body that performed the work in the last birth is already lost. So how is it possible to enjoy or suffer the reactions of that work in different bodies? Okay, that's uh, a valid question. How is it possible to enjoy or suffer the reactions of that work in a different body? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Atheists want evidence for the resultant actions of past activities. Therefore, they ask, where is the proof that I am suffering and enjoying the resultant actions of past karma? They have no idea how the subtle body carries the results of the present body and the present body's actions down to the next gross body. The present body may be finished grossly, but the subtle body is not finished. It carries the soul to the next body. Actually, the gross body is dependent on the subtle body. Therefore, the next body must suffer and enjoy according to the subtle body. The soul is carried by the subtle body continuously until liberated from gross material bondage. Text number 60. The great sage Narada continued, the living entity acts in a gross body in this life. This body is forced to act by the subtle body, composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. After the gross body is lost, the subtle body is still there to enjoy or suffer. Thus, there is no change. Wow. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The living entity has two kinds of body, the subtle body and the gross body. Actually, he enjoys through the subtle body, which is composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. The gross body is the instrumental outer covering. When the gross body is lost, or when it dies, the root of the gross body, the mind, intelligence, and ego, continues and brings about another gross body. Although the gross bodies apparently change, the real root of the gross body, the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego, is always there. The subtle body's activities, be they pious or impious, create another situation for the living entity to enjoy or suffer in the next gross body. Thus, the subtle body continues, whereas the gross bodies change one after another. Since modern scientists and philosophers are too materialistic, and since their knowledge is taken away by the illusory energy, they cannot explain how the gross body is changing. The materialistic philosopher Darwin has tried to study the changes of the gross body, but because he had no knowledge of either the subtle body or the soul, he could not clearly explain how the evolutionary process is going on. Interesting. One may change the gross body, but he works on the subtle body. People cannot understand the activities of the subtle body, and consequently, they are bewildered as to how the actions of one gross body affects another gross body. The activities of the subtle body are also guided by the supersoul, as explained in Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Sarvasichaham Hridi Sanivista Matak Smritir Chanam Apohanam Cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Supersoul, is always guiding the individual soul, the individual soul always knows how to act according to the reactions of his past karma. In other words, the Supersoul reminds him to act in such a way. Therefore, although there is no apparently a change in the gross, therefore, although there is apparently a change in the gross body, there is a continuation between the lives of an individual soul. There is a continuation between the lives of an individual soul. Text 61. Well, look, the soul is eternal. So there's no death for the soul. So therefore, It's possible there is a continuation between the lives of an individual soul. Text 61. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body through the activities of his mind and intelligence. He acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. After giving up the gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or a demigod's body on this planet or on another planet. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although the root of distress and happiness is the mind, intelligence, and ego, a gross body is still required as an instrument for enjoyment. The gross body may change, but the subtle body continues to act. Unless the living entity gets another gross body, he will have to continue in a subtle body or a ghostly body. One becomes a ghost when the subtle body acts without the help of the instrumental gross body. As stated in this verse, Shayanam imam utsrijya swasam tam. The gross body may lie on a bed and rest. And even though the machinery of the gross body is working, the living entity may leave, go into a dream, and return to the gross body. When he returns to the body, he forgets his dream. Similarly, when the living entity takes on another gross body, he forgets the present gross body. The conclusion is that the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego creates an atmosphere with desires and ambitions that the living entity enjoys in the subtle body. Actually, the living entity is in the subtle body, even though the gross body apparently changes, and even though he inhabits the gross body on various planets. All the activities performed by the living entity in the subtle body are called illusory because they are not permanent. Liberation means getting out of the clutches of the subtle body. Liberation from the gross body simply involves the transmigration of the soul from one gross body to another. When the mind is educated in Krishna consciousness or higher consciousness in the mode of goodness, one is transferred from either to the upper heavenly planets or to the spiritual world, the Vaikuntha planets. One therefore has to change his consciousness by cultivating knowledge received from Vedic instructions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the disciplic succession. If we train the subtle body in this life by always thinking about Krishna, we will transfer it to Krishna Loka after leaving the gross body. This is confirmed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Janma karma chame divyam, evam yo vititatpata, jakvadeham punar janma, naiti mam eti sarjana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna, Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Thus, the change of the gross body is not very important, but the change of the subtle body is important. The Krishna consciousness movement is educating people to enlighten the subtle body. The perfect example in this regard, is Ambarisha Maharaj, who always engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Savai Mana Krishna Padaravinda Yo. Similarly, in this life, we should always fix our mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, who is present in the Archa Vigraha, the incarnation of the deity in the temple. We should also always engage in his worship. If we engage our speech in describing the activities of the Lord and our ears in hearing about his pastimes, and if we follow the regulative principles to keep the mind intact for advancing in Krishna consciousness, we shall certainly be elevated to the spiritual platform. Then, at the time of death, the mind, intelligence, and ego will no longer be materially contaminated. The living entity is present, and the mind, intelligence, and ego are also present. When the mind, intelligence, and ego are purified, all the active senses of the living entity become spiritual. Thus, the living entity attains its Satchit Ananda form. The Supreme Lord is always in his Satchit Ananda form, but the living entity, although part and parcel of the Lord, becomes materially contaminated when he desires to come to the material world for material enjoyment. The prescription for returning home back to Godhead is given by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 9:34. Manmana bhava mad bhakto mad yajimam namaskuru. Mam ivashisi yuktavaivam atmanam matparayana. Always think of me and become my devotee. Always worship me and offer your homage unto me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. Text 62. The living entity labors under the bodily conception of I am this, I am that. My duty is this, and therefore I shall do it. These are all mental impressions, and all these activities are temporary. Nonetheless, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity gets a chance to execute all his mental concoctions. Thus, he gets another body. Well, that doesn't solve the problem of material life. That just complicates it.
Yes.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As long as one is absorbed in the bodily conception, his activities are performed on that platform. This is not very difficult to understand. In the world, we see that every nation is trying to supersede every other nation, and that every man is trying to advance beyond his fellow man. All of these activities are going on under the name of advancement of civilization. There are many plans for making the body comfortable, and these plans are carried in the subtle body after the destruction of the gross body. It is not a fact that after the gross body is destroyed, the living entity is finished. Although many great philosophers and teachers in the world are under the impression that after the body is finished, everything is finished. This is not a fact. Narada Muni says in this verse that death, that at death one takes his plans with him. Vihinyat, and to execute these plans, he gets another body. Okay. This is called Punar Bhava. When the gross body is finished, the plans of the living entity are taken by the mind, and by the grace of the Lord, the living entity gets a chance to give these plans shape in the next life. This is known as the law of karma. As long as the mind is absorbed in the laws of karma, a certain type of body must be accepted in the next life. Karma is the aggregate of fruitive activities conducted to make this body comfortable or uncomfortable. We have actually seen that when one man was about to die, he requested his physician to give him a chance to live 4 more years so that he could finish his plans. This means that while dying, he was thinking of plans. After his body was destroyed, he doubtlessly carried his plans with him by means of the subtle body, composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. Thus, he would get another chance by the grace of the Supreme Lord, the Supersoul, who is always within the heart. Sarva Sichaham Kriti Sanimisto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. In the next birth, one acquires remembrance from the Supersoul and begins to execute the plans begun in the previous life. This is also explained in Bhagavad Gita in another verse. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridese Rajunatistati Ramayan Sarvabhutani Yantra Rudrani Mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Bhagavad Gita 1861. Situated on a vehicle given by material nature and reminded by the supersoul within the heart, the living entity struggles all over the universe to fulfill his plans, thinking, I am a Brahmana, I am a Kshatriya, I am an American, I am an Indian, and so on. All these designations are of the same essence. There is no point in becoming a Brahmana in performance
In preference.
to
In preference.
in preference to an American or becoming an American in preference to a Negro. After all, these are all bodily conceptions under the modes of material nature. Text 63. One can understand the mental or conscious position of a living entity by the activities of two kinds of senses: the knowledge acquiring senses and the executive senses. Similarly, by the mental condition or consciousness of a person, one can understand his position in the previous life. That's an interesting statement. One can understand his position in the previous life. Purport. There is an English proverb that says, the face is the index of the mind. If one is angry, his anger is immediately expressed in his face. Similarly, other mental states are reflected by the actions of the gross body. In other words, the activities of the gross body are reactions of the mental condition. The mind's activities are thinking, feeling, and willing. The willing portion of the mind is manifest by the activities of the body. The conclusion is that by the activities of the body and senses, we can understand the condition of the mind. The condition of the mind is affected by past activities in the past body. When the mind is joined with a particular sense, it immediately becomes manifest in a certain way. For instance, when there is anger in the mind, the tongue vibrates so many maledictions. Similarly, when the mind's anger is expressed through the hand, there is fighting. When it is expressed through the leg, there is kicking. There are so many ways in which the subtle activities of the mind are expressed through the various senses. The mind of a person in Krishna consciousness also acts in a similar way. The tongue chants Hare Krishna, the Maha Mantra. The hands are raised in ecstasy, and the legs dance in Krishna consciousness. These symptoms are technically called Asta Sattvika Vikara. Sattvika Vikara is transformation of the mental condition in goodness or sometimes transcendental ecstasy. Text 64. Sometimes we suddenly experience something that was never experienced in the present body by sight or hearing. Sometimes we see such things suddenly in dreams. Purport. In dreams, we sometimes see things that we have never experienced in the present body. Sometimes in dreams, we think that we are flying in the sky, although we have no experience of flying. This means that once in a previous life, either as a demigod or astronaut, we flew in the sky. The impression is there in the stockpile of the mind, and it suddenly expresses itself. It is like fermentation taking place in the depths of water, which sometimes manifests itself in bubbles on the water's surface. Sometimes we dream of coming to a place we have never known or experienced in this lifetime. But this is proof that in the past life we experience this. The impression is kept within the mind and sometimes becomes manifest either in dream or in thought. The condition is that the
The
mind,
conclusion.
no,
The
I'm
conclusion.
sorry, yeah. The conclusion is that the mind is the storehouse of various thoughts and experiences undergone during our past lives. Thus, there is a chain of continuation from one life to another, from the previous lives to this life, and from this life to future lives. This is also sometimes proved by saying that a man is a born poet, okay, a born scientist, or a born devotee. If, like Maharaj Ambarisha, we think of Krishna constantly in this life, Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, we will certainly be transferred to the kingdom of God at the time of death. Even if our attempt to be Krishna conscious is not complete, our Krishna consciousness will continue in the next life. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 641. Prapya punya kritam lokam usitva sasvati sama. Suchinam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Vrasto Vijayate. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. If we rigidly follow the principles of meditation on Krishna, there is no doubt that in our next life we will be transferred to Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavana. Well, that's good news. Text 65. Therefore, my dear king, the living entity who has a subtle mental covering develops all kinds of thoughts and images because of his previous body. Take this from me as certain. There is no possibility of concocting anything mentally without having perceived it in the previous body. That's a very interesting statement.
Mhm.
There is no possibility of concocting anything mentally without having perceived it in the previous body. Purport. Krishna Bahirmukha Hana Bhoga Panchakare. Nikata Sta Maya Tare Japatiya Dare. Prema Vivarta. Actually, the Supreme Personality Godhead Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. When a living entity wants to imitate him, he is given a chance to satisfy his false desire to lord it over material nature. That is the beginning of his downfall. As long as he is within this material atmosphere, he has a subtle vehicle in the form of the mind, which is the stockpile of all kinds of material desires. Such desires become manifest in different bodily forms. Srila Narada Muni requests the king to accept this fact from him because Narada is an authority. The conclusion is that the mind is the storehouse of our past desires. and we have this present body due to our past desires. Similarly, whatever we desire in this present body will be expressed in a future body. Thus, the mind is the source of different kinds of bodies. Okay, the mind is the source of different kinds of bodies. If the mind is purified by Krishna consciousness, one will naturally, in the future, get a body that is spiritual, full of Krishna consciousness. Such a body is our original form. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms, Shivera Swarupahaya Krishnera Nityadasa. Every living entity is constitutionally an eternal servant of Krishna. If a person is engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, he is to be considered a liberated soul even in this life. This is confirmed by Srila Rupa Goswami. Ihayasya hare dasye kamana manasa jira nikilaswapi aswasto avastaso jivan mukta sauchyate. One who engages in the transcendental service of the Lord in body, mind, and words is to be considered liberated in all conditions of material existence. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.187. The Krishna consciousness movement is based on this principle. We must teach people to absorb themselves always in the service of the Lord, because that position is their natural position. One who is always serving the Lord is to be considered already liberated. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo vipacharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatitya brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who always engages in the spiritual activities of unalloyed devotional service at once transcends the modes of material nature and is elevated to the spiritual platform. The devotee is therefore above the three modes of material nature and is even transcendental to the Brahmana platform. A Brahmana may be infected by the two baser modes, namely Rajaguna and Tamaguna. A pure devotee who is free from all material desires experienced on the mental platform and who is also free from empiric philosophical speculation or fruitive activity, is always above material conditioning and is always liberated. Text 66. Mana eva manusyasya purva rupani samsati bhavishyatascha badram te tatad aiva na bhavishyata. Okay, all good fortune unto you. The mind is the cause of the living entities attaining certain types of body in accordance with his association with material nature. According to one's mental composition, one can understand what the living entity was in his past life, as well as what kind of body he will have in the future. Thus, the mind indicates the past and future bodies. Very interesting. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind is the index of information about one's past and future lives. There it is. If a man is a devotee of the Lord, he cultivated devotional service in his previous life. Similarly, if one's mind is criminal, he was criminal in his last life. In the same way, according to the mind, we can understand what will happen in a future life. In Bhagavad Gita 14:18, it is said, Urdvam gachanti satvasa madhye tistani rajasa jaganya guna vrittista adho gachati tamasa. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those planets. And those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish planet. Christian mode of goodness, his mental activities will. Similarly, if he has a low mentality, his future life will be most abominable. The lives of the living entity in both the past and the future are indicated by the mental condition. Narada Muni is herein offering the king blessings of all good fortune, so that the king will not desire anything or make plans for sense gratification. Oh, that's the mercy of Narada Muni. The king was engaged in fruitive ritualistic ceremonies because he hoped to get a better life in the future. Narada Muni desired him to give up all mental concoctions. As explained before, all bodies in heavenly planets and hellish planets arise from mental concoctions, and the sufferings and enjoyment of the material life are simply on the mental platform. They take place on the chariot of the mind, Manoratha. It is therefore said, Yasyasti Bhakti Bhagavat Yakinchana Sarvara Gunasatra Samasate Sura Harava Bhaktasya Kuto Mahad Guna Manoratena Sati Dhahavati Vahi. One who has unflinching devotion for the personality of Godhead has all the good qualities of the demigods. But one who is not a devotee of the Lord has only material qualifications that are of little value. This is because he is hovering on the mental plane, and is certain to be attracted by the glaring material energy. Bhagavatam 5:18-12. Unless one becomes a devotee of the Lord or becomes fully Krishna conscious, he will certainly hover on the mental platform and be promoted and degraded in different types of bodies. All qualities that are considered good according to the material estimation actually have no value, because these so-called good qualities will not save a person from the cycle of birth and death. The conclusion is that one should be without mental desire. Anya vilasita sunyam jnana karmadi anavritam. One should be fully free from material desires. Philosophical speculation and fruitive activity. The best course for a human being is to favorably accept the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of human life. Well, that is doable. It's not impossible to do. And actually, it is full of happiness if you do this. Do what? Be fully free from material desires, philosophical speculation, and fruitive activity. The best course for the human being is to favorably accept the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of human life. There it is, this takeaway of the statement in the 66th text and in the last paragraph is very profound. Unless one becomes a devotee of the Lord or becomes fully Krishna conscious, he will certainly hover on the mental platform and be promoted and degraded in different types of bodies. All qualities that are considered good according to the material estimation actually have no value because these so-called good qualities will not save a person from the cycle of birth and death. The conclusion is that one should be without mental desire. Anya vilasita sunyam jnana karmadi anavritam. One should be fully free from material desires, philosophical speculation, and fruitive activity. The best course for a human being is to favorably accept the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of human life. Okay, well, this is very, very important statement. Text 67. Sometimes in a dream, we see something never experienced or heard of in this life. But all these incidents have been experienced at different times, in different places, and in different conditions. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In the previous verse, it was explained that in dreams we see that which we experience during the day. But why is it that we can sometimes in our dreams see what we have never heard of or seen at any time during this life? Here it is stated that even though such events may not be experienced in this life, they were experienced in previous lives. According to time and circumstance, they combine so that in dreams we see something wonderful that we have never seen or experienced. For instance, we may see an ocean on the peak of a mountain, or we may see that the ocean has dried up. These are simply combinations of different experiences in time and space. Sometimes we may see a golden mountain, and this is due to our having experienced gold and mountains separately. In the dream, under illusion, we combine these separate factors. In this way, we are able to see golden mountains or stars during the day. The conclusion is that these are all mental concoctions, although they have actually been experienced in different circumstances. They have simply combined together in a dream. This fact is further explained in the following verse. Text 68. The mind of the living entity continues to exist in various gross bodies and according to one's desires for sense gratification. The mind records different thoughts. In the mind, these appear together in different combinations. Therefore, these images sometimes appear as things never seen or never heard before. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The activities of the living entity in the body of a dog may be experienced in the mind of a different body. Therefore, these activities appear never to have been heard or seen. The mind continues, although the body changes. Even in this lifespan, we can sometimes experience dreams of our childhood. Although such incidents now appear strange, it is to be understood that they are recorded in the mind. Because of this, they become visible in dreams. The transmigration of the soul is caused by the subtle body, which is the storehouse of all kinds of material desires. Unless one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, material desires will come and go. That is the nature of the mind. Thinking, feeling, and willing. As long as the mind is not engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the mind will desire so many material enjoyments. Sensual images are recorded in the mind in chronological order, and they become manifest one after another. Therefore, the living entity has to accept one body after another. The mind plans material enjoyment, and the gross body serves as the instrument to realize such desires and plans. The mind is the platform onto which all desires come and go. Srila Narottam Das Thakur therefore sings, Guru Mukha Padma Vaikya Chite Te Kariya Aikya Arana Karina Kariha Mane Asa. Narottam Das Thakur advises everyone to stick to the principle of carrying out the orders of the spiritual master. Well, that's good advice. One should not desire anything else if the regulative principles ordered by the spiritual master are followed rigidly. The mind will gradually be trained to desire nothing but the service of Krishna. Such training is the perfection of life. Okay, we should take this statement very seriously if we want to make spiritual advancement in this life. Text 60, are we over time now?
Just, it's 7:35. If you want to read one more verse.
Yeah. Text 69. Satvaika Nishte Manasi. Bhagavat Parsava Vartini. Tamas Chandra Masi Vedam Uparajya Vavastate. Krishna consciousness means constantly associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in such a mental state that the devotee can observe the cosmic manifestation exactly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does. Such observation is not always possible, but it becomes manifest exactly like the dark planet known as Rahu, which is observed in the presence of the full moon. Well, the dark planet known as Rahu, that is not a wonderful planet. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It has been explained in the previous verse that all desires on the mental platform become visible one after another. Sometimes, however, by the supreme will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the whole stockpile can be visible all at one time. Well, that would be very, very, let's say, stressful for a devotee, or for anyone. In Brahma Samhita 554, it is said, Karmani nirdahati kintu bhakti bhajam. When a person is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, his stockpile of material desires is minimized. Indeed, the desires no longer fructify in the form of gross bodies. Instead, the stockpile of desires become visible on the mental platform by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this connection, the darkness occurring before the full moon, the lunar eclipse, can be explained as being another planet known as Rahu. According to Vedic astronomy, the Rahu planet, which is not visible, is accepted. Sometimes the Rahu planet is visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears that this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern moon excursionists may be due to Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Very significant statement, which is true. They've never really gone to the moon, but they did go to the demoniac Rahu planet. Actually, they are not going to the moon. See how Prabhupada is validating it, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. No living entity is free from the cycle of birth and death, unless he takes to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated, Satvaika Nishte, that when one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in one stroke, he is freed from past and future mental desires. Then, by the grace of the Supreme Lord, everything becomes simultaneously manifest within the mind. In this regard, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur cites the example of Mother Yasoda seeing the whole cosmic manifestation within the mouth of Lord Krishna. Wow. And at that time, Krishna was like a very young boy. Yeah, the associates of Krishna, of the young boys, uh, told Mother Yasoda that Krishna was eating uh, earth or dirt, and Mother Yasoda forced Krishna to open his mouth. And what did she see? She saw the whole universe in one place in the mouth of her son, and she became confused. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Mother Yasoda saw all the universes and planets within the mouth of Krishna. Similarly, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, a Krishna conscious person can see all his dormant desires at one time and finish all his future transmigrations. This facility is especially given to the devotee to make his path clear for returning home back to Godhead. Yeah, you don't want to get involved in so many tangential situations. You want to go directly back to Godhead. Why we see things not experienced in this life is explained herein. That which we see is the future expression of a gross body or is already stocked in our mental stockpile. Because Krishna conscious person does not have to accept a future gross body, his recorded desires are fulfilled in a dream. We therefore sometimes find things in a dream never experienced in our present life. Yep, that happens often. Text 70. As long as there exists the subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identification and its relative objective, the gross body, exists as well. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. What time is it? Are we over time?
Yeah, we can end with this verse.
The desires in the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego cannot be fulfilled without a gross body composed of the material elements earth, water, air, fire, and ether. Well, that excludes the ghosts. When the gross material body is not manifest, the living entity cannot factually act in the modes of material nature. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the subtle activities of the mind and intelligence continue due to the sufferings and enjoyments of the living entity's subtle body. The consciousness of material identification, such as I and mine, still continues because such consciousness has been extant, meaning present, from time immemorial. However, when one transfers to the spiritual world by virtue of understanding Krishna consciousness, the actions and reactions of both gross and subtle bodies no longer bother the spirit soul. Well, that is good information. When one transfers to the spiritual world by virtue of understanding Krishna consciousness. Well, that is what we're trying to do. We are trying to understand Krishna consciousness. When one transfers to the spiritual world by virtue of understanding Krishna consciousness, the actions and reactions of both gross and subtle bodies no longer bother the spirit soul anymore. All right, I think we'll stop right there. All right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, my dear devotees. Our takeaway for today. One second. Yeah, our takeaway for today is text 69. Krishna consciousness means constantly associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in such a mental state that the devotee can observe the cosmic manifestation exactly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does. That's a wonderful statement.
Mm.
Such observation is not always possible, but it becomes manifest exactly like the dark planet known as Rahu, which is observed in the presence of the full moon. And in the purport, it says, it has been explained in the previous verse, that all desires on the mental platform become visible one after another. Sometimes, however, by the supreme will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the whole stockpile can be visible all at one time. In Brahma Samhita 5.54, it is said, Karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. When a person is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, his stockpile of material desires is minimized. Indeed, the desires no longer fructify in the form of gross bodies. Instead, the stockpile of desires become visible on the mental platform by the grace of the Supreme Personality of God. In this connection, the darkness occurring before the full moon, the lunar eclipse, can be explained as being another planet known as Rahu. According to Vedic astronomy, the Rahu planet, which is not visible, is accepted. Sometimes the Rahu planet is visible in the presence of the full moon night and full moon light. It then appears that this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern excursionists may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible Rahu planet. There it is. That means that the so-called uh, so-called uh, personalities that claim that they've gone to the moon or landed on the moon, they actually have landed on the planet Rahu, not the moon. Now, the moon is a sacred place. It is a exalted place where many great devotees are present. However, this Rahu planet is a place where there are demons. And whenever the astronauts say they went to the moon, they actually have not gone to the moon. They've gone to the Rahu planet. Okay. The Rahu planet is visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears that the Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. See, that's the point. It's near the more orbit of the moon. The failure of modern moon excursionists may be due to the Rahu planets. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. There it is, direct statement. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. No living entity is free from the cycle of birth and death unless he takes to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated, Satvaika Krishna Satvaika Krishna consciousness. No, I'm sorry, Satvaika Niste, that when one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in one stroke, he is freed from past and future mental desires. Then, by the grace of the Supreme Lord, everything becomes simultaneously manifest within the mind. In this regard, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur cites the example of Mother Yasoda seeing the whole cosmic manifestation within the mouth of Lord Krishna. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Mother Yasoda saw all the universes and planets within the mouth of Krishna. Similarly, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, a Krishna conscious person can see all his dormant desires at one time and finish all his future transmigrations. This faculty is especially given to the devotee to make his path clear for returning home back to Godhead. Why we see things not experienced in this life is explained herein. That which we see is the future expression of a gross body or is already stocked in stocked in our mental stockpile. Because a Krishna conscious person does not have to accept a future gross body, his recorded desires are fulfilled in a dream. We therefore sometimes find things in a dream never experienced in our present life. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Our takeaway today is very profound. It says, the darkness occurring before the full moon, the lunar eclipse, can be explained as being another planet known as Rahu. According to Vedic astronomy, the Rahu planet, which is not visible, is accepted. Sometimes the Rahu planet is visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears that this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern moon excursionists may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to be transmigrating from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. Okay, that's our takeaway today. But this Prabhupada is saying that it appears that this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern moon excursions may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Again, from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Well, Prabhupada here is saying our astronauts have not actually gone to the moon. They've gone to the planet Rahu, which is a, uh, actually it's an invisible planet. So after reaching this planet, they come back. And basically they come back with nothing because they haven't gone to the moon and they go to this invisible planet called Rahu. That's why he says the failure of modern moon excursionists may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back empty-handed. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. Now, you see, if you want to really know what the truth is about interplanetary research, you have to read Bhagavad Gita, as we're doing, and Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada here is saying there's a planet called Rahu. It's not visible. However, it is visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears that this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. And the failure of modern moon excursions may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they're not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Oh, well, this is bad news for the for the uh, for the moon excursions. They're not actually going to the moon. They're going to this Rahu planet, which is an invisible planet. It's basically a place where there are demons. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the Rahu planet. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. So the failure of modern moon excursionists may be due to the Rahu planets. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible Rahu planet. Well, so much for the interplanetary excursions by the so-called scientists. They don't really understand what is happening. And therefore, they end up going to this non-visible planet called Rahu. But sometimes the Rahu planet is visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears like this Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern moon excursions may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to this invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Okay, that's Prabhupada's, let's say, final uh, understanding of the moon landings. They're not actually going to the moon, they're going to the Rahu planet, which is an invisible planet. And that's why they go there and they come back and they say they went to the moon. You don't know if they went to the moon or not. They could have gone they could have gone to the Rahu planet, which is not the moon, and come back and say they went to the moon. So here Prabhupada is saying it clearly. He says, the failure of modern moon excursionists, that's a fact. They have not really been successful in going to the moon, may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to the invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon. Okay, he's saying it now adamantly. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. And after reaching this planet, they come back. Apart from this discussion, the point is that a living entity has immense and unlimited desires for material enjoyment, and he has to transmigrate from one gross body to another until these desires are exhausted. Okay, so now you know the truth, my dear devotees, of the so-called moon landings. They haven't really gone to the moon. They've gone to the Rahu planets. Okay, so thank you very much. We'll stop right there. And please don't be too shocked that the space travelers don't know where they're going, but they are claiming things that are not true. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's good that we have Prabhupada's purports, then we can know what the truth is. And the truth is that they have never really gone to the moon. They did go somewhere, though. They went to the Rahu planet, which is an invisible planet. And it's visible in the presence of full moonlight. It then appears that the Rahu planet exists somewhere near the orbit of the moon. The failure of modern excursionists may be due to the Rahu planet. In other words, those who are supposed to be going to the moon may actually be going to the invisible planet Rahu. Actually, they are not going to the moon, but to the planet Rahu. Why? The moon is a sacred planet. The demigods go to the moon to drink the somarasa that increases their lifespan tremendously. It's not a planet just full of dust. It's a spiritual planet. So when they say, well, the moon is just dust, that means they haven't gone to the moon. Okay, so you see, it's necessary to read Prabhupada's purports to understand what the truth is. And by the way, what do they have to prove? Now, what do they have as proof that they went to the moon? The only thing they have is 6 rocks that they brought back from the moon. That means they didn't go to the moon. And they went to the Rahu planet and came back with basically nothing. Haribol, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All right, we learn a lot of good things by reading Prabhupada's purports. Thank you very much. If there's any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Harivilas Maharaj. I have a question that is. Yes, you talked about dreams, saying that we see, we may be some living beings that we were pilot in a previous life or demigod or some kind of that. So we experience that in this life. So if we see our loved ones in our dreams, is that something real, or that's just our mind playing tricks on us? Can you verify that, please? Thanks.
Well, what you're seeing is a dream. So some dreams are valid and some dreams are not valid. So if you're seeing your relatives who died in your dream, it's because there is some message coming to you. But you shouldn't take these messages seriously. Why? Because your subtle consciousness may have all kinds of experiences from previous lives, but that's not necessarily going to help you in this life. In this life, we have the chance to be Krishna conscious and be free of all different experiences that we had in our past lives. We can be free by going back to Godhead. That's what we should focus on. We should not be influenced by dreams of past lives that we've had. We should have complete determination to go back to Godhead. But if you keep focusing on things that you experienced in previous lives, how will you go back to Godhead? Everything depends on what we are focusing on in our minds at the moment of death. So we should not be focusing on our previous lives. We should be focusing on Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's a very dangerous thing to be focusing on previous lives' activities. It's not really going to help us to go back to Godhead. So we better think about that carefully. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in the material world, always dreaming about our previous lives in the material world. We want to develop love and devotion for Krishna and wipe out all these remembrances of previous lives that will take our mind away from Krishna. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Therefore, it
Thank
says
you.
here, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Maharaj. That was nice explanation.
Haribol.
Haribol.
So our takeaway today is the following. No living entity is free from the cycle of birth and death unless he takes to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated that when one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in one stroke, he is free from past and future mental desires. That's our takeaway. That's what we should meditate on. Then, by the grace of the Supreme Lord, everything becomes simultaneously manifest within the mind. Okay. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur cites the example of Mother Yasoda's seeing the whole cosmic manifestation within the mouth of Lord Krishna. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Mother Yasoda saw all the universes and planets within the mouth of Krishna. Similarly, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, a Krishna conscious person can see all his dormant desires at one time and finish all his future transmigrations. This faculty is especially given to the devotees to make his path clearer for returning home back to Godhead. Very profound statement.
Okay. Hare Krishna. So we'll regroup again in the evening.